war itself had become more perilous. The weapons had evolved. It has remained the same. Hunt them down and kill them off.
The Underworld franchise is a series where I've heard about it, but I've never had any interest in watching it until now. What is a franchise that I can talk about in one video that was planned to be like 5 videos in a ranking, but then plans change, so I'm just gonna combine all of these things into one video, 5 movies, and then the ranking at the end, what I think about them. And I've never been too keen of vampires or werewolf film. I don't know why. Maybe that has to do with the fact that I grew up with the whole Twilight Saga shit. They never interested in me, so this is kind of me one foot in of the werewolf and vampire genre, at least one side of it. Maybe it'll get me to watch The Lost Boys or the Howling franchise. Anyways, let's talk about the first one that came out in 2003.
One family lusting for power and wealth.
Soon we'll defeat the vampires on their own ground.
So one thing I noticed immediately about this film is that it's basically vampires or werewolves, or what's called lycans, with guns. That sounds both cool and ridiculous, and there is one ridiculous moment of Celine shooting the ground, shooting holes in them so that she could fall down. That shit was ridiculous. There's been this big war between the two for like 600 years, 6 centuries. As we see in like the third film, it's been going on since like 1402 or 1401 until now, which is, I'm assuming, early 2000s. One real big positive is the hierarchy in this film. So when we first see the vampires or Celine go into a big mansion, on the other side the werewolves of Lycan, they live underground. So it's clearly established that the vampires see them as higher than the Lycan, which makes sense because they were slaves to them, as it is revealed by Lucian in this film, where they're being treated like slaves to the vampires, to the elders, seeing them as higher just because they're different and all that stuff. And how Victor later on is kind of a traditionalist, where he couldn't stand a filthy werewolf or Lycan being with his daughter, being in love with his daughter. So I really like the whole hierarchy and like the chain of commands and how they see each other. Threw me off. I was like, okay, this is gonna be a war between vampires and werewolves. It's gonna get bloody, right? But no, there's like this hierarchy thing, which is okay, this is cool. Like, I like this whole world that they're setting up. The Lycans want this character named Michael, and turns out they want to blend their blood with vampire blood to make a hybrid powerful than the typical Lycan and vampire. There's also this thing where Celine falls in love with them. Like, I don't know, maybe she's just different from the others. She has a love for like humankind or mankind, I don't know, but she apparently loves them. All right, it feels like it's just kind of there, forced in a way, but whatever. Speaking of the human element, they are walking around normal human people, which means that nobody knows about vampires or Lycans existing at this point in time. The point of having Michael be bitten by Lucian and having it combine the blood so that they can have the perfect union between the two species. And then also the transformations done in the film, it looks decent, not the best, but it looks decent for a film that came out in 2003. I was like, okay, you know what, it doesn't look weird or clunky. Most of the time it's done in the dark, it's hiding the weird CG. And then Craven, this character, I like calling him a goddamn rat. Not only is he working for or working with Lucian, respects the elders, but he doesn't really care for them, or I don't know if he's even care. He cares about himself. He cares about being in the higher ranks, being a part of the elders, sitting on those chairs or whatnot. He thinks of him as someone who's higher than all the other vampires, but he survives because he's a rat and knows how to rat himself around or whatever. Or maybe not a rat, maybe a goddamn cockroach, just kind of surviving anywhere and is willing to do anything to get to his goal. Lucian is a character that's interesting because he has at least some sort of layers to him, where yes, he's the opposing species, he's a Lycan, they're despised by vampires, but once he explains the war and why it's been going on for so long, now granted, it's basically over a girl, but we will find out in the third movie that was kind of just the final catalyst. But it seems like Victor killing his own daughter, Lucian love, had this big affair, was the final catalyst in starting this war. So he's a really cool character, but sadly he is killed off. Also, another thing I want to mention, this film really is a time capsule because of the whole leather, especially Celine. She's wearing all this leather stuff. It's like, who would wear that? And like, I do wonder if like Kate Beckinsale just doesn't want to do it anymore because she has to wear that really tight leather suit. It does not look comfortable at all. And then one of the elders, Victor, who is like dead but not dead, him and the other elders, Marcus, they're like in this chamber thing, asleep and sort of awaiting their return, sitting on the throne or chairs. But Celine wakes him up early, knows about all these things, proves that Craven is just a little rat and cockroach. But Victor has plans of his own. Celine finds out about his whole daughter thing, and now he sees Celine as a daughter, is willing to do what's necessary to kill his own family in order to keep the tradition of vampires on top, Lycans at the bottom, which is what started the whole resentment. Celine has to kill him as well in the school like head kind of slice thing. Looks a bit weird, but whatever. And so by the end, Celine is by herself with Michael, with Craven having his own goals, Victor not being who she thought he was, and then Lucian being dead. Can't be on their side. Both her and Michael are on the run by themselves, and they only have themselves to worry about and kind of trust because she can trust nobody else. Both have become the hunted by the end of the film. Cool way to end it. So the film overall, it is still pretty good. It still has this really cool world building of vampires and Lycans, how they work and how they should work according to some elders. A few ridiculous stuff like the whole whole shooting floor thing and whatnot. But this first one is still quite a bit of fun and still pretty good.
War between vampire and lichen has raged for centuries. Now my own kind have turned against me.
Underworld Evolution came out like, I think 3 years after the first one, and it continues the story of Michael and Celine on the run by both vampires and lichens. One thing I like immediately is that they kill off Craven. Craven wakes up, one of the elders, Marcus, immediately has like this different look, wing, bat vamp or whatever, bites him to get all the info out. He just kind of flies around, bites it, drinks the blood of certain vampire werewolf, figures out all the details and info and whatnot. And then this one is obviously much more gorier. Hold on shots of like ripping heads off of werewolves or vampires, or just showing blood for a longer extended amount of time, which makes sense because if this is a war between vamp and lichens, bound to be blood at some point. So I was expecting at least one of the films to get super kind of bloody or gory, show more excessive blood, hold shots on ripping heads off and whatnot. So the big kind of like plot or device MacGuffin kind of item is this watch thing, which ties into Celine and how Victor killed her parents and whatnot, and how it will help Marcus revive his own brother, who's apparently like a werewolf and he's a vampire. Either way, it's really a device to open up some sort of like underground. I'll be honest, I completely forgot about this. All I know is that Marcus wants it. He flies around, causes havoc and trouble for all the characters, and is willing to kill anyone that steps in his way or lies to him. And because Marcus is going around, flying around, fighting this watch, killing everyone in his way, he kills Michael, which I was like, okay, good. Like, actually kind of glad, because again, this whole between Celine and Michael, I don't really get it. I don't know why it's there, but it's there. And I also seen his first transformation of a hybrid was actually pretty cool. It's the face of a werewolf, thieves and whatnot, or vamps. So when he apparently is dead, I was like, okay, cool. This is, you know what? I don't mind this. But then guess what? You know, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna kill him off. We're gonna find some way or some device or whatever, bring it back. And turns out because he's a hybrid, through blood images and whatnot, he's back alive. I was like, okay, so I guess being a hybrid is the way for the writers to be like, you know what, we can do whatever we want, right? No stakes whatsoever. The whole point of him dying was for Selena to go insane essentially and killing Marcus. But I guess that's not the case, because he's just back alive by the end. Team, or like the Alexander Army Task Force, was there to be useless. They were there for Marcus to kill them. They did absolutely nothing. And then, oh yeah, another ridiculous moment. I'm like expecting at least one ridiculous moment in all these films now, where Selena is reloading clap, or like clap reloading or something. She reloads by clapping. Hilarious. Really dumb, but a lot of fun. They introduce a character named Tannis, and he's another kind of Craven where all he cares about is himself. He is by himself. He's a rat. He has valuable information about Marcus and the watches and his brother and all this stuff, which will lead to his downfall and his death, because Marcus is at his place, gets information out of him. And the only reason I even mention him is because he is relevant in this film and in the third film. He is kind of relevant and important integral moment in both these films. Alexander, who turns out to be like the father of Marcus and all the other like elders or people, I think he's like the father to all these like elders that are like creating chaos, or just, you know, Marcus. And he's not able to kill them, or he is able to kill them, but he's just not willing to, because it's family and it's hard to do that. Celine tries to convince him to get rid of his own sons, but that's very hard. It's a family. So instead of killing his own sons, just like Victor did to his own daughter, he is willing to clean up the messes that they've made, cover up all of these things about vamps and lichens from the public. And so because of that, he's just been letting his sons go around creating chaos, not willing to interfere. And so that's a really cool kind of way to, again, kind of world build. This second one is essentially continuing the story with Celine and Michael, but then also adding on these characters and things, adding to the lore, means how they're hidden from the rest of the population. But this would eventually get Alexander killed as well, because he's not willing to face the fact that and do the inevitable, which is kill his son, and he can't do that, so that gets him killed. Marcus has no issues getting rid of him. And then Marcus, he also isn't this like bat vamp for the majority of the film. Eventually he sucks off enough blood, I guess. Hold on, that isn't right. Whatever. He sucks enough blood to turn into a human form. And then speaking of sucking things off, by the end, Celine finds out Michael is supposedly dead and whatnot. And then in order to defeat Marcus and his brother, he needs to suck off Alexander, because not only does Alexander want this, but it's a way for the future and for her to get more powerful so that she isn't affected by sunlight. So she sucks him off by his wrist. Man, the more I say that, the more it doesn't really sound right. Either way, he sucks off some blood, making her into kind of a super, not super, is super the right word? Making her an enhanced vampire. She's not affected by sunlight by the end. Go kill Marcus. All that army that's there, they're all dead. It's Marcus versus Celine and Michael as he comes back, as Celine finds out. It has a really cool head kill thing by Michael ripping out the literal head of his wolf. That was really cool. Killing Marcus, impaling him through his head. So the film is all with Celine and Michael surviving their run once again by Marcus and werewolves, lichens, in order to live to see another day. I do like this one. It is good. It is a lot more gory gorier, but I don't know. I think the first one set up, it's like world building a lot more better with seeing how vampires work and lichens work and all this stuff. Or this one does the same with the whole Alexander character and Canis character, but on a much more grand level of why they're not noticed by the human population. Underworld Evolution is still good. I still very much enjoyed it. It's still a good continuation.
One born into privilege,
Sonia, you risk too much for a father to ignore.
the other bred for slavery.
Lucian, you are...
Underworld: Rise of the Lycans is a prequel to the series and tells the story of how Lucian and the Lycan kind came to hate and despise all of vampires, and how the war started with this one vampire girl. And so that's kind of the issue with this one. Watching this film, you're thinking, okay, I don't know how this ends, so it's like, I don't know why am I watching this, or what's the whole point or purpose of doing this film. With that being said though, it's still a good film. It's enjoyable with knowing the end result of how everything starts, as it is mentioned in the first film. Everything from Lucian loving Sonia, enslaving all of these Lycans, sees himself and vampires as higher than werewolves and all these things. It's cool to see, but did it need a film? I don't know. Leaning towards more no, but I also didn't mind this film, so it's like, you know what? I'm alright with this, you know? Not needed, but I'm fine with it. So first thing that Victor does, kill the parents of Lucian, and he's about to kill baby Lucian, but he's like, you know what? I'm gonna enslave him. Kind of twisted and messed up about how he sees him as a son, but then he's like, you know what? You're gonna be enslaved because you're different than me. These movies essentially show like slavery and racism, right? It's essentially that, but with vampires and werewolves, or at least that's what I got out from this series. But despite Lucian being enslaved, there's one thing that's keeping him around, and it is Sonia. Or Sonja? No, I'm gonna call her Sonia. Even though there's a J, I think they call her Sonia. I'm gonna call her Sonia. He is in love with her. They both have a love for each other. It's this huge, a big affair. If anyone were to find out, it would cause a riot. 1401, but with vampires and werewolves. So yeah, it's a big deal. This big affair. If it was leaked out, it would be very disappointing on Victor's sort of perspective. As more time goes on, the elders notice that Sonia is missing from her chair because she is one of the people in those chairs and councils and whatnot. And so the one person that finds out about this affair is Tanis. But the interesting thing about this is that he doesn't rat her out. Well, at least not yet, because he cares about himself. And what he wants is to sit on one of those thrones. He wants to be one of the council because that's what he cares about. Sonia, on the other hand, she doesn't care about that whatsoever. Agreed to this trade of helping Lucian get out. But by the end, it doesn't matter because Victor does suspect that Tanis is like working with Sonia and Lucian, or not, maybe not Lucian, but in cahoots. But then he lies. He reveals to Victor about the whole affair, confronts Sonia, and then imprisons her. Whether it's both sides or whatnot, it seems like there's going to be betrayal within their own species. Vampires are willing to betray each other for their own good, for their own selfish needs, in order to get on top, which begs the question, is this war even worth it? But Victor doesn't see that. He sees himself as someone who has these rules, and you better follow these rules, because if you don't, you're gonna get killed or in prison, who knows. But he has these certain rules, follow them or you die. Since Lucian is out, he leads some of his people out, but is willing to go back inside to fight off all the vamp, which then leads to him getting tortured again, him being whipped, and then leading all his people to this war. Now, one thing I did not expect is for Victor to actually care about, like, obviously he cared about Sonia, but he's like, yes, kill his own daughter, super messed up, but you can see on his face, he does truly care about his daughter, but because of his ideals and the way he works, able to be thorough and kill his own daughter, knowing the fact that he won't see her ever again just because of a love affair, is a bit, you know, extreme a bit. Seeing his daughter go away, being killed, which is the final catalyst to Lucian of starting this war, rebelling against vampires, fighting against them, and I guess winning in the end. This first battle they win, technically, because Victor and the other elders, they go in hiding and sleeping and whatnot. So it establishes how the war starts, how it came to be, how both kinds resented each other, and how the final catalyst was Sonia dying. And technically they won the first battle, or at least Lycans won the first battle, which will lead to this long ass 6th century goddamn war. And oh yeah, I forgot as well, Celine shows up at the end just to kind of credit Kate Beckinsale as, oh yeah, she's in the film for like the last 20 seconds of it. She's kind of showing up, recapping her stuff, I guess. So because of a stubborn man, or a stubborn vampire elder who loves being traditional, he doesn't see his daughter being fit to be living, so he gets rid of her, while the lover, Lucian, is broken. So they start fighting for years and centuries. That's really it when you think about it. I still like this movie. Rise of Lycans is still a good film. Wasn't necessary, no, but it's not bad. But I can also see people be like, nah, this movie's not necessary. Everyone knows the end result of it. It's been said in the first film. What's the whole point of it? I guess the whole point of it was to kind of show us and then lead into Underworld Awakening, but I don't know, wasn't necessary. But Underworld Rise of the Lycans, very much enjoyed. Entertaining, still liked it, still good.
I was held captive for 12 years. Humans hunt the Lycans and vampires.
Underworld Awakening might be my least favorite of the series because nothing really happens, but also at the same time things happen, and they had something there. They had a really interesting concept of humans finding out of the identities or just the existence of vampires and werewolves, and they should have, I don't know, done something with that, and they did. But again, it went back to, hey, guess what, Lycans are back, they're in charge of this whole corporation thing. It's like, no, you had something there. Like, maybe I just wanted too much things, but all they did was, guess what, we found out they're here, we're gonna try to find a cure or a vaccine or whatever, we're gonna try to find something to prevent the infections from happening. And that's really it. They really should have gone into human perspective of it in this film, or the detective and the so-called facility thing corporation. That's really it. This cop guy or detective is there to help out and aid Celine in getting rid of Lycans in the facility and do nothing as well. He's there for explaining stuff and talking about how the world was like 12 years since she's been asleep. There's one positive for this is the fact that they do portray Celine as a villain from the human race. I do like that all over the news. All of it was just kind of surface level. They didn't really extend it nor go into it because, I don't know, Lycans? Who knows? So Michael in this film is kind of non-existent because he, I guess, dies in the first 15 minutes or whatever. Goes in the water. There's a water explosion. Both of them go into hiding, or not hiding, but go to sleep, put by the doctors. Turns out his DNA has been transferred into this girl named Eve, and he died. He was just killed off screen, which never really cared for the character. Never really got why she loved him, but I guess if people do love this character, kind of a disservice in a way to being like, what if people did like this character, fell in love with him for the past like 2 movies, and then just have him being written off like that or killed off like that? So yeah, Eve, this girl, she feels like a plot device, like a MacGuffin. I don't really have much to say about her. She's just there. Turns out she is the daughter of Celine and I guess Michael in a way because of DNA tests behind the scenes off-screen stuff or whatever. She is a hybrid. She needs blood to feed in case she gets shot by like a bullet. Meets another vampire named David. They go into this underground secret vamp thing. Bunch of vampires who are hiding from extinction. Now this is like the only group or like family of vampires that actually are good to Celine because they don't betray her at all. In this film or in the next film, they are actually good vampires, sort of mind their own business until they meet Celine and Eve and brought into this war, and they are just kind of nice vampires. They just want to live their life, but because of extinction and extorting and devices that can tell if you're a vampire or Lycan, they have to hide from everyone. Same thing for Lycans, but they are hiding in disguise. And then there are some that are out kind of baiting people or vamps so that the Lycans can rise up because, surprise, that doctor or whatever is a Lycan, having trust of the government so that they can have this facade human race thing, trying to rebuild Lycans into creating more and super Lycans. They want super Lycans, and apparently Eve, this little girl, is the key to that. And the one thing I forgot Celine had was that she was invincible to sunlight, so when David dies, she like cuts into his body, grabs his heart, and then squeezes it, saving and reviving David back again because she has the blood of the future said by Alexander. And so I completely forgot about that until they mentioned that in the 5th one. I don't think she's a hybrid, she's just very enhanced, or I guess a super vamp. I'm assuming she's very much enhanced by the whole sucking off the blood of Alexander. And so because Lycans are the one behind it all, or not behind it all, but they're disguising themselves, this whole movie feels like a giant waste of time. You had this human element. Granted, I don't know what you do with that, but you had something there. You had the backlash. You could have had them help, or I don't know, maybe they wouldn't really help both sides. They were just kind of smack in the middle of this big war between vamps and werewolves that's been going on for so long. So maybe doing the whole human thing was a big mistake. They had something there, and then instead they kind of go back to the whole status quo with vampires and Lycans. They're still at it. Though in I guess 2010s, it was just uneventful. I was like, oh okay, they're doing something kind of cool, something new. Apparently these super Lycans, they can heal. Celine shoot one of these Lycans or super Lycans, they can heal faster. So there's that. So I guess that's what makes it different from a typical normal Lycan to a super Lycan. Horrible name for it, but what is you gonna call it? So yeah, this 4th film is not really impressive. It's there. It is what it is. Nothing really you missed. Eve is just kind of there as a plot MacGuffin device. The way they wrote out Michael was kind of lame despite not liking his character. I think fans of this will probably not be too happy of his write out. Thomas and David, those vampire group thing, or at least their family or group, they were cool. So yeah, Underworld Awakening, it was alright.
Must not rest until we have destroyed their final sanctuary.
Tell your Marius, I'm not finished with this war.
The 5th and final film, Underworld Blood Wars, or at least the final film as of recording this in 2021, called Blood Wars, and there's blood in it. It's got a really cool like bind rip kill. You know, this movie was somewhat disappointing. I mean, it had wars in it, and I was like, okay, is this gonna end the war? And it didn't, which is fine. It seems like this war's gonna go on. It's like this big old cycle of there's always gonna be this weird tension and war between vampires and Lycans, which I'm fine with. But getting to that end was just kind of like boring and kind of a dull movie. They introduced kind of love affair thing with the Lycan and vampire again. I guess it's calling back to the first film. That was unnecessary. They were there to, I guess, kill Celine and have her come back. A lot of it is just prep for war, and there's not a lot of war going on, which is a bit disappointing. And then as I said for Awakening, this film reminded me of Celine has that whole super blood thing where she could bring people back to life and she isn't affected by sunlight. Also, Eve is gone, so again, Awakening, just kind of look back on it, is just not really relevant at all because they route Eve, Michael. It's like, okay, what's the point of that? If they are gone, that should be a motivation for Celine to fight back again, or at least try to stop this whole war. They didn't go that route, tied to how Michael died.